G'day and welcome back to Foord Off-Road. This time we've got Aaron's Dmax. I'm going to show you all how to put a 2-inch lift kit in it. Today we're going to answer the age-old internet question: can you fit 33s with a 2-inch lift? So we have 2 front struts, 2 front coils, some bushes for the strut tops on the front, 2 rear shocks, 2 greasable pins for rear spring eyes, 2 greasable shackles for the rear, 4 U-bolts, a bush kit, rear shocks, which I think I already said, and 2 rear springs. There's all different sorts of rates of springs you can get depending on what load you carry in your car. Aaron only has a tub, he only ever has camping stuff and a rooftop tent, so these are a pretty light spring, but they're still a lifted spring. So if you've got a massive canopy and tow a caravan and that, you want to get pretty heavy duty stuff. These are 100 kilo constant load. I think the heaviest one they make is 600 constant load. So there's a fair few different load ratings. Anyway, first up, we're going to get this on some jack stands and then get to work. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, go down. Slow. Make sure your handbrake's on before you start jacking your car up too. I'm going to start with the front end of the car. You only just need a couple of tools, not that many. It's actually quite easy to pull it apart. 2 10mm for the ABS line. 12mm top of the ABS line, and for the brake line bracket on the side. Pull those out. If you've been smashing bog holes, Aaron, I don't know what you're talking about. Then the ABS line's going to be pretty stuck in there, or the ABS sensor's going to be pretty stuck in there. Just pull that up through the top control arm just so it's out of the way, because you don't want to pull on that and damage the line. Now, split pin in the turret end and split pin in the top ball joint. .22mm spanner, 22 on the top ball joint. Just loosen the top ball joint one off till the nut's nearly off. Don't take it all the way off yet. Okay, now that the nut's off that and the nut's almost off of the top ball joint, how you get these out is get yourself a hammer and hit right on the face there of that one and right on the top of that one. That, and just like that. So now that that's apart, the next thing is the lower link pin bolt. Sometimes it just comes straight undone, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, there's a little Allen key hole in the end there, so you put a 14mm ratchet spanner, 5mm Allen key, and hold it while you undo the nut. Next step, get a lever in between the up control arm and the coils. Just lever it down a bit so you can loosen this nut off. That's the reason you leave this nut on, is so that when you hit on that, this doesn't just drop. You can control it. I'm going to undo a 19mm nut and bolt from the bottom of the front strut. So now that the bottom's undone, there's 3 14mm nuts on the strut top up here. A long spanner helps to get them undone, and then a ratchet spanner to take them all the way off. And the last one, just leave on there a little bit. I always make it the front one because it's easier to reach the front one. Pull the bottom bolt out. So that hang. So once you got to this point, pull the other side apart to the same point, because you need to undo both ends of the sway bar in order to push it down. So that you can then undo the top nut on the strut and easily Move that out of there. So now you need to put the new springs on the new struts, but to do that you have to use the old strut tops. Some cars, most other cars, you can buy the strut top through TJM, but for Isuzu Dmax, Colorado 7 and Isuzu MUX, they don't make them. So we're going to go down to the workshop, put those on and show you how to do that. You can use, we're going to compress the spring in an actual professional proper spring compressor. You can buy cheap ones from Repco. They're fine for Commodores and stuff. There is no way I would ever use those on heavy duty lifted suspension.
Bloody legends.
Rolling?
Yeah.
Right. So I've come down to Roundabout Tyre and Auto to use the spring compressor to get these front struts fitted up. Roundabout Tyre and Auto is also the people that have supplied this kit, and they do suspension, they do brakes, they do steering, they do anything else to do with the car, custom exhaust, tyres, wheel alignments, anything. So check them out. Anyway, the kit comes with, each strut has a strut, spring seat, 2 spacers and some bushes. So the 2 spacers is, you can kind of adjust the actual height of your 2-inch lift kit. So if you have just a bumper bar, like no bull bar or anything, then you don't put any spacer in, you just put the spring seat straight on. If you have just an ALB bull bar, you just put the little spacer just to make it, because you got an extra weight over the front axle. If you have a bull bar and a winch, put the bigger spacer. If you have a bull bar, a winch and some side rails, put both spacers. Or if you have a 6.5 poster, put both spacers. Anyway, and that'll just counteract the extra weight. Aaron only has an ALB bull bar. We're going to put both spacers anyway because it's going to be sick. When you undo these, push it down to the ground all the way, take that off, flip it over and let it spring back up. You're going to do that 3 times. Fully compress it and let it spring back up 3 times before you put it together. And when it's coming back up, it needs to be facing the way that it will be in the car, not laying down and not upside down. So first off, we have to pull the old strut apart because we need to reuse this strut top. This is a lot safer than using those dodgy clamp type ones, because I mean, look at the thickness of this steel compared to like a 10mm threaded rod that the other one's made out of. Strut's loose. Well, actually, if you're doing this in your backyard, chances are you're not going to be doing this part. Bloke at the mechanic shop's going to be doing it. I'll show you how to do it anyway. 17mm on top of the strut top and a shifter. And that is the piece that we need to use again. Okay, so putting the strut together. First off, like I said, whatever amount of spaces you're putting in compared to what modifications your car has, full bar, side steps, winch, we're putting both of them. And the spring seat sits on, then the spring seat, and then the dust boot back on. Same for the other one. Both spaces. Spring seat. Dust spring. Now we're going to set the springs up in the spring compressor. Strut. A washer. A bush with that little bit pointing up. Strut top. Bush with that little bit pointing down. Another washer. Nut. So new nuts are 19mm. That up all the way. Back it off a bit. Now I should have mentioned this before I pulled it apart, but I don't normally worry about it because I just know from doing a lot of them which way they point. So, around here. So once this is back together, you can't turn the strut top. So you need to make sure that the pins are in the same position in relation to the bottom of the strut as they were before it come apart. So Dmax it's easy. One of them, the longer one, is just dead straight on. Dead straight on with the bottom of the strut. So if you look down it, it's just straight. It's got to be in that spot or you won't get it back in the car. If you have so Dmax, Colorado, MUX, and Colorado 7 are all the same, dead straight. Hilux is dead straight. Foord Ranger is not straight, they're ever so slightly off. So if you're doing a Nissan Ranger, it's basically the same procedure as, well, they're all basically the same for front struts. You just got to make sure it's pointing in the right spot because it's not straight. Don't know what an Amarok is, and I don't care because it's an Amarok, but make sure you check that before you pull it apart. And there's one front strut ready to go back in the car. If you want to be really professional about it, you can have a good think about which way the stick is going to point when it goes back in the car, and also where this is pointing in relation to the end of the spring. You get it all looking good. So the stick is facing forwards, it ends at the same spot. It's a professional job. Back at home now, got these all put together. Now I'm going to chuck them back in. First step is make sure there's no mud around where the strut top nuts are going to do up. Put one nut on top just to hold it. Bottom of the strut in. Do the nuts on the strut top up tight. Bottom of the strut back up. Okay, now we're going to put the link pin back in. Self lever in between one of the coils and the upper control arm. Put this up, lever this down, put the nut on the end. Tie it end back in. ABS line. Once again, we're going to chuck it on some stands and get the back wheels off. Once the car's on some jack stands, I'm going to take the spare wheel out. You don't absolutely have to, but it's going to make it a lot easier. Now we're onto the back. We're going to start off by loosening, not removing, just loosening both side U-bolts. Taking off the 12mm that holds the handbrake cable to the spring, and the two 19mm on each side that hold the shackle together. And then two 19s for the rear shackles. Grab the jack back under the diff center, just jack it up just to hold the weight while we take the shocks off so you don't undo that and it goes dunk. That'll do. 17mm top and bottom. Millimeter on the inside and the outside. These ones are always really tight. Gonna do this side first. When you're letting it down, you've got to be real conscious of how much pressure is going on the ABS line and on the brake line. Front eye bolt out and take the spring out. Next you've got to put the bushes in the rear spring before you put them in, and some bushes in the chassis before you put them in. A little bit of grease and spread it all around. Those ones in the chassis. Big ones in the eye end. Little ones in shackle end. In the eye end, we've also a cross tube. Bushes in there, take it over and put it in. Starting with the eye. I need to let the jack down a little bit more, just a tad. Yeah. New greasable pin in the front eye. Stop. U-bolts. The new ones are 22mm. I'm going to do them up firm but not tight. Bit more. You got to pay, when you're putting it in, pay attention to which side the grease nipple's on. So if you have a ute with a toolbox, you would probably put the grease nipple, like if you have a tray and toolbox, put the grease nipple on the inside so it's easier to reach. But with a tub and a spare wheel right there, it's easier to reach them if they're on this side. We're going to do this bit up tight first before we do the U-bolts up tight, because if you do these up tight first, it'll make sure it's dead straight. If you do the U-bolts up tight as you can and then do this up, the spring could be a little bit crooked. Down a tiny little bit on the jacket here. Yep. On the spring there's a little threaded hole in the back for the handbrake cable bracket to go in. Do the front spring eye bolts up, which is a 22mm. Do this up pretty bloody tight. It does have a nylock nut, so it's not going undone anyway, but still don't want it to be loose. Now for the rear shocks, and once again you've got to pump them in and out 3 times. And then jack it up a little bit. Righto. Anything that you do up with a rattle gun, got to check it by hand just to make sure it's tight. This next step is something that you don't normally have to do. It entirely depends on what the manufacturer of the springs and U-bolts does. So because this is the lightest pack that TJM supply, the 100 kilo pack, but they use the same U-bolts for every pack, and each pack, if it's weighted to carry more weight, it's thicker. So the U-bolts are actually too long to get it tight enough, so it's just slipping on the thing. So we're gonna have to chop the U-bolts off before we can actually tighten them. Now we can actually get the socket on there and tighten them. These need to be done up to maximum mugger-duggers, and then maximum as tight as you can get them with the big bar. Yeah, how tight's that?
Fucking tight.
How tight's that though?
Oh, I don't know. Tight enough.
So now that it's all back together, chuck the 35s back on.
What?
35s?
35s?
Put 35s on?
I don't know.
No, you can't fit 35s with a 2-inch lift, you can only fit 33s. Never mind. Put your regular size tyres back on. Once you're completely finished, check that all your wheel nuts are tight by hand. So now we're done, 2-inch lift is in. Whenever you do anything to the front end of your car, you have to have wheel alignment, especially a 2-inch lift. The wheel alignment, camber caster, toe specs are going to be all over the place. Have to have an alignment. Monday we're going to go back to Roundabout Tyre and Auto and get them to do that for us. So before we do that, go for a test drive.
We test it out.
Get some stick flex. Righto, let's go.
Let's go.
So that's how to fit a suspension lift kit into a Dmax. That's the exact same procedure for a Colorado. They've got the exact same suspension in them. That's pretty much the same for any dual cab ute that is independent front and leaf rear. A couple of bolts are in different spots, but it's the same, along the same guidelines. Hope that helps someone out. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Hit me fucking guard.